Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for magic.
Hello, everybody. My name is Brian Ward, welcoming you to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. With me, as always, the psychologist to these superheroes, these superheroines, these supervillains, and everyone else who's there in Gotham City and beyond. Dr. Andrea Letamendi. Hello, Drea.
Hi, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing really well. You feeling any different?
I do feel different.
Yeah? What makes you feel different?
We have a new home.
That's right. We do have a new home. We are now a part of Fanboy Comics Network. So I don't know if you're worried that might mean something. Trust me, it means a lot of things. But what it doesn't mean is that you will have to go somewhere else to hear the Arkham Sessions. If you're listening to us right now via iTunes or Stitcher or really anywhere you get your podcasts, you don't have to change a thing. The RSS feed is going to stay the same, but we are very happy about this because we have been fans of fanboycomics.net for quite some time, and they've been friends of ours. So we are really happy to be over there on their network.
Exactly. It's an exciting collaboration. As you mentioned, we've been friends and close colleagues with Barbara and Bryant Dillon, who are the co-founders, along with their wonderful friend, Sam Rhodes. So for folks who are unfamiliar with Fanboy Comics has been around since 2010. Bryant, Sam, and Barbara essentially put together this comic book publishing company and online community in order to kind of bring fans and creators and folks who love comics and pop culture together. So they provide podcasts, interviews, comic convention appearances, signings, and of course they're publishers, so they have original content. It's a fantastic platform and community to be on, so I'm just excited to be part of it.
Really, I'm just excited about being a part of this network. I feel like for the first time, it's sort of like a home, a community.
Absolutely. And, don't let the name fool you. Fanboy Comics is all about being inclusive and celebrating diversity, and it's about education. It's about community. So, it's all about, again, just bringing fans and creators and projects together. And so it's a great collaboration, and I'm super excited.
For sure. So if you want to check out the rest of Fanboy Comics stuff, go over to fanboycomics.net and give those guys some love. Drea, I want to bring up another thing. This is sort of a throwback to last week's episode dealing with Matt Thorne. I want to show you something that Bernard O'Shea sent in to us. Those of you who've listened to the show for a while, you certainly know our friend Bernard. Bernard has contributed a lot of questions and even observations to several of the shows. He's having as much fun with this show as we are. And in watching that episode last week, he noticed something that I thought was kind of cool. So looking at the black and white photograph that was living in Leslie Tompkins' office, we recognize this one, or I'm sorry, this is the in the yearbook that Bruce or Batman takes off of her shelf, and it's got Thomas Wayne, it's got Leslie Tompkins in there, and it's got Matt Thorne. This is the photo of Matt Thorne. Do you see anything interesting about this photo?
I see a man. He's in a tuxedo. This is an old-timey photo. It's in black and white. It says Thorne. It says from the Three Musketeers. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Love, Matt.
Let's zoom in just a little bit here. Check out that year.
1907.
1907.
Oh, we have a year.
Yeah, we're now sort of putting a year to where Batman takes place. If you've ever thought it was contemporary, Apparently, Matt Thorne went to school with Leslie and Thomas in 1907.
Now, do you think the writers wanted that in, or do you think the animators threw that in as a...
I don't know.
As all kind of a neat, unique detail to that animation, and no one noticed.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting because I would have thought that maybe they were trying to prevent from dating the cartoon. Bernard actually mentions with that photo that it was taken about 40 years ago. So that was from the episode. That would place this series in about 1947.
Wow. Okay.
Let's go on to this week's episode where we get to deal with one of your favorite characters and certainly one of mine because of my obsession with magic, Zatanna.
Detixie me.
And that's
backwards for I'm excited.
Yay!
I'm always excited.
Awesome. That is true. You are always excited.
I think I say that about every episode, but this character is one of my favorite characters in all, I would even say in all of the, the DC universe. If I were to pick, a female character that I really like, I think Zatanna is one of them.
What is it about Zatanna that you're so enamored with?
I think it's the fact that she's really, spunky and smart and talented. She's clearly someone that, people look to as having this power. And in this particular episode, she's a stage magician. And
I mean, yeah.
You're not into stage magicians?
Yeah, we'll talk about it.
Okay. Well, having said that, she clearly has honed this craft. She's really successful and powerful, and I don't mean that in the supernatural way. I sort of mean that in the social way.
Yeah.
And she's also, she's just a great character. And
well, for those of you who aren't previously aware of Zatanna, Zatanna's actually been around for quite some time. She's been around since the 60s, I believe 1964. She originated in a Hawkman comic. And in that comic, she was looking for her father and her mother. And then as a result, ended up bouncing between the DC books, interacting with a number of people. And, since then, she has just become a love of DC Comics and DC Comics fans. People absolutely adore Zatanna. Paul Dini absolutely adored Zatanna. And then he ended up marrying his very own Zatanna, Misty Lee.
A magician.
Yeah, she is a fantastic magician. And if you know her or if you've seen her, she could easily be Zatanna any day of the week.
Right.
And when we're talking about stage magic, and you and I, we've seen her do her Houdini seance up at the Magic Castle here in Hollywood.
Okay, you're just going to have to tell me, what is it about stage? I mean, you're talking about like the David Copperfield stage illusionist type of thing.
Right. So I'm obsessed with magic. I love magic, but I'm a little bit of a, my nose is up in the air a little bit. And stage magic to me is, it's people in boxes, it's assistants, it's loud music, it's flashing lights, it's everything that you could possibly need to distract someone from seeing a thing that's happening somewhere and doing this and doing that. And oftentimes the magician isn't even the one doing the magic. The magician is out front doing something while something else is happening. And that to me is not impressive.
While the magician is sort of waving around with his, white gloves and big hat, there's someone in a box somewhere just trying to get through the trapdoor or trying to shimmy through something.
Whatever the effect is, usually the assistants are doing more of the magic than the magician themselves. And that to me is not nearly as impressive as if you just happen to have a deck of cards, or even a coin. Even though coin magic is fairly limited, there are only so many different ways you can make one coin going from one place to another place or disappear.
Right. So you're referring to close-up magic.
Close-up magic is amazing. The kind of thing that you can go to a party and just say, like, look, hey, do you have a deck of cards? And it can be a regular deck of cards. It could be your deck of cards. It could be your unopened deck of cards, and I can still do the same magic trick. That to me is much more impressive than people 100 yards away, showing you magic from a stage.
And from my perspective, the psychology of magic is different depending on the type of magic being done. And we'll get into the psychology of magic in this episode.
Yeah.
It seems, I think, kind of counterintuitive, or it seems like different disciplines, but there is a field that studies the psychology of magic.
So I want to ask you a very important question. Knowing that, I need to ask why you decided to go into the field you did and not the field of magic.
Well, like as a performer, or as a psychological.
If there's a psychology field that is directed at magic, how could you choose anything else to
You know
focus
the
on?
answer to this, because what brought me into psychology initially was the rogues gallery. So I was interested in the mind and how behavior works, and different pathways and development, and so I went into clinical psychology.
Gotcha.
Which once in a while, like on this show, I get to talk about the psychology of magic.
Yeah, that is true. Well, Zatanna was the daughter of Giovanni John Zatanna.
That's confusing.
Well, it's even more confusing when you actually think about the fact that Zatanna was his last name, which then makes her Zatanna Zatanna. I don't know if anyone really thought that out, but it is true, and she's a lot of fun. So let's go into this episode. We are setting the stage with a stage, actually. Everyone who's anyone in Gotham is at this magic show.
Good evening, Gotham. I'm Zatanna.
And she, like all stage magicians, has the perfect stage act going on right now. Big music, lots of effects, lots of things happening, lots of stuff coming from places they probably shouldn't come. Lots of stuff. I mean, lots of birds are flying. Oh, yeah, she truly is magical, because I don't know where any of the things.
At some point, I think like a snake pops out of nowhere.
She pulls a snake out with some flowers.
And she has the classic magician's outfit, which is, as we know, also the quintessential Zatanna outfit. The top hat, the coat and tails, the little black jacket, white top, and of course, just the nylons. She's basically wearing leotard.
Well, and nothing is more impressive than a magician who's basically naked, because they can't hide anything anywhere. So if someone pulls one over on you and they're looking the way that she does, she's an excellent magician. Now in the comics, she actually did have magical abilities. She and her father both.
Right.
There is no allusion to that necessarily in this particular incarnation of her. So we're going to go ahead and say she can't until we see something else.
Right.
Well, although this opening act very easily could have been very heavily magic,
Like, you mean like having these supernatural powers?
Yeah, maybe all those birds did come from her ability to just do things.
As we move through the episode, the end of the episode also could involve some supernatural abilities.
Maybe. So maybe she does have magic. So we'll play it. We'll play it by ear as it goes on. But as we're watching, we see in the audience Bruce and Alfred out enjoying themselves, or are they? It's very possible that Bruce is here
to stalk this woman.
To stalk her.
How long has it been? 10 years? 12?
All that and another lifetime.
Bruce was training with her father, Zatanna. He showed up simply wanting to learn the art of escape. And he didn't want to perform. He didn't want to do magic. He didn't want to be a guy going from town to town as a magician or an escape artist. He simply wanted to know how to escape from things. And Zatanna found himself saying things to him and teaching him things that he's never taught anyone else, simply because there's something about him.
There was something inside you I had no right to deny. Something deep and painful.
At the same time, Bruce is getting to know Zatanna because, as we know, she's Zatanna's daughter. And she is also learning the craft of magic. And there's an interesting scene where they imply that there's this kind of relationship budding between them.
It's interesting because it's showing us a scene where he is learning this craft and he's informing Zatanna that he will be leaving tomorrow for Japan. So we're actually seeing that that his ability to escape has actually come before his training with the Sensei in Japan. And of course, we know what happens there.
Right.
He becomes enemies with Kyodai-ken. And,
Right.
Then Night of the Ninja, Day of the Samurai, and all of that stuff. So this is interesting because it's actually giving us a little bit of a chronology for how Batman's training went. He honed and learned the craft of escape. Here was Zatanna, maybe having a little bit of a flirtatious thing with Zatanna, and she is broken up when she finds out that he's leaving. In fact, she tries to get him to stay. She handcuffs him to the wall.
That's what you do.
Yeah, and says, if you were any kind of escape artist, maybe for you'd be able to get out of there. When she turns around, he's in fact gone already.
Now you see him, now you don't.
Let's talk about the fact that Zatanna does a card trick for Bruce, who's going by the name John Smith. If there were ever a name I would use if I didn't want my name to be known, it would be John Smith. I'm just saying. So she does this card trick where she tries to predict his future. She asks him to pick a card. He picks a card. She says,
I see emotion, intensity, 2 of hearts.
Joker.
Of course. His true love.
his true love. But it's not like what she saw in the vision was untrue, because you've got lots of emotion, lots of intensity right there in the man who is the Joker.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't even think about that.
It's just not Zatanna. I guess he could have been the 2 of hearts as well, if we go with the whole with your hypothesis that the 2 of them need each other.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a dumb trick anyway.
Sad. But just like Bruce Wayne.
Right.
So once again, Drea, let's talk about those attachments that Bruce may or may not have with the women in his life.
Well, what's interesting is that we know it started fairly early on, that currently with with his role as Batman, he's pushing away a lot of women, a lot of what could be potential romantic relationships. But what's interesting is that 10, 12 years ago, here was this, I would say potential romantic relationship, someone that trusted him, someone that he had something in common with, and he essentially left and didn't communicate with her.
So I'm going to throw this out there, even though I realize that it's probably still pre-release of the movie, but this young Bruce sort of suggests to me that he was pre-Andrea Beaumont. He seems young. He seems a bit more svelte. So it's possible that he was learning how to become an escape artist before going to Japan, which as we know had to have been after Andrea. Mm-hmm.
These are the events in Mask of the
Phantasm. Yeah. So I'm not trying to trip anybody up here. I'm simply trying to put sort of a gauge to, was Zatanna before or after the woman that we said unlocked Bruce's, potential for becoming Batman.
Sure.
I don't know, something to think about a little. 10 to 12 years go by, and now Bruce is sitting outside watching her perform this stage show right in front of the Gotham Mint. We know this because at one point she brings on 2 people on stage to help her with her big trick.
And here to help me demonstrate are Mr. Irving Fontswater, director of the Gotham Mint, and noted magic debunker Dr. Montague Kane.
And they are using the Gotham Mint for this illusion, very much the way that I'm sure David Copperfield, when he made the Statue of Liberty disappear
Right, you have to have officials who
yeah.
can verify. Yes, this is the mint. Yes, this is actual money that's
Right.
that's being held here. And what she does is the big trick here is to make the mint and the money disappear.
Yeah, they open up the mint doors and it's like $10 million just sitting there in cash on the floor, and she makes the mint and the money disappear, and then she makes the mint return, but the money is gone. And
Dun, dun, dun.
she is instantly arrested for this.
There are cops on site
Yeah,
that
they're ready.
handcuff her, and they read her the Miranda rights. They are taking her away.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, she could not, bring back the money, so she is considered a criminal here.
Look, it's a trick, an illusion. I don't know what went wrong, but if we can all just calm down for a second.
So, Drea, I want to bring up something that you mentioned last week. We were giving Batman the test of the code of ethics that psychologists have to abide by. And we were trying to determine how well Batman does or does not stick to those ethics. And I think by the end, we sort of adopted the idea that he will twist that code in order to best fit his needs or his purposes, right? I remember
That he has a similar set of codes, but he bends them a little bit.
Well, this is one of those cases where he bends them quite severely, because next thing you know, Batman has gone and broken Zatanna out of the paddy wagon that is transporting her to the Gotham City PD.
And in this case, I think he knows that she's been framed for this robbery.
Doesn't matter if she's been framed. If I know that you just got framed for a robbery, I wouldn't immediately go break you out. I would.
I'm so disappointed in you.
I would go find the person who framed you for the robbery, and I would bring them down. I wouldn't, because she actually says,
You know, I didn't love the idea of spending the night in jail, but this does technically make me a fugitive.
and Batman's okay with this. I don't know.
Well, I think he knows that what he's doing is helping her to establish who framed her. I think he knows he needs her to be a part of this process. Otherwise, he's not going to be able to solve this. So it's almost like, this will all be justified when you help me find the person that framed you.
Why do you care about some leggy dame in nylons? Or have I answered my own question?
If you want to go it alone.
She's aware that men may try to, to literally and figuratively pick her up, and that she's calling him out on it.
Although he is calling her out on it a little bit, and I don't know if it's I don't know if he's calling her bluff or if he's just this much of a douche. He's like, fine, get out. Like, he just broke her out of jail.
Right. And now he's dropping her off on the street.
Yeah, and she's like, look, just so you know, I'm no damsel. And he's like, get out of the car.
Right.
Yes, we get it. You're not that kind of guy, but you would think that you would just put the foot down on the pedal a little harder and, drive through
and scare
it.
her?
And be like, look, that's not what I'm here for. I know you didn't do it. We're going to figure it out together, whatever. Rather than like,
right.
Fine, get out of the car.
I think he absolutely has this chip on his shoulder, and he needs to be this kind of dramatic, guy. And I think part of that is because, remember, he doesn't necessarily like it when women like Batman. Now, Bruce wants certain women to like him. But Batman's uncomfortable with that aspect. He does not want women to think that he's just rescuing damsels in distress.
Yeah.
He is not doing this for them. He's doing it for a completely different reason. And so when that gets muddled, he gets very upset.
Yeah. And he ends up, it's funny because he ends up taking her immediately to the scene of the crime. He breaks her into the Gotham Mint to take a look at where the money should have been. And there they find scratches and they find broken glass.
That would have been one mighty big piece of glass. Or mirror.
Like the one you used to reflect the hologram of the vanished mint.
Again, being that magic nut, they keep referring to holograms in this particular scene. And that trick would not be done with holograms as we, it would not actually be a hologram.
So you're saying that when you take a mirror to reflect an image onto a stage or onto our point, the point that we're supposed to be looking at as the audience, that's not a hologram.
It's not a hologram. I mean, a hologram would be basically three-dimensional light that is,
projected.
But you still have to have a surface for that hologram to be projected onto. It can't be projected into midair. So that effect is usually done via actually an old trick by the name of Pepper's Ghost. I mean, this is a trick that you can find at Disneyland, doing the Haunted Mansion. Or if you've ever been to a haunted house where you see a ghost, then you can see straight through that ghost. That's Pepper's Ghost.
So tell us how Pepper's Ghost works. Is it simply that you just kind of reflect an image?
Yeah, kind of
into another space.
You have to have two different rooms essentially, or two different spaces. The one that the audience is looking at would be empty, but between the audience and that empty space is a large piece of glass or plexiglass done at an angle so that you shouldn't be able to see that piece of plexi and or glass, but it should be angled so that a neighboring section or another room would reflect into it. Now, if you were to just light the person or the object behind the plexi and not light the other room, it wouldn't look like whatever's in the other room. Say you've got a ghost standing there. You wouldn't see that ghost. But if you illuminate that other room at the same time, you're now getting the reflection in that plexi, and it looks like that thing in the neighboring room is behind the glass. And so when you look at the dancing ghosts in the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland or Disney World, that is Pepper's Ghost. Tupac is Pepper's Ghost.
What? No, Tupac was a hologram.
Not a hologram. Pepper's Ghost. They have not actually figured out a way to put holograms on a stage yet. They'll call it that.
Right.
It's a very sexy term. The Tupac hologram, the Michael Jackson hologram, and they're not holograms. They're old routines.
Wow.
So yeah.
So you're saying that Zatanna essentially was. They're saying if they were going to uncover the trick, it would actually be Pepper's Ghost. It would actually be this technique.
More than likely. I don't know how she's doing this particular disappearance, but when she refers to a large mirror or large piece of glass, I would think that she's doing Pepper's Ghost. Now, what's interesting is they determined, Batman says, I think the money was already gone before your trick. I don't think it was ever here. And they refer to holograms being projected onto the glass or the mirror, whatever. Now, what's interesting is that's exactly how Pepper's Ghost would have already worked. The money would not have been there in the room. It actually would have been in a neighboring room, and they would have both been illuminated. So once that glass disappeared, it would look like, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
Or just once that light turned off, there's nothing. The money's gone. But so when Batman's like, I don't think the money was ever here. Zatanna could be like, yeah, no kidding. That's
so I did the trick, buddy.
How the trick works. And it's a really good thing that the Gotham Mint has two rooms set up that way that could actually be that could actually work out, for this trick. That's just fortuitous. But anyway, enough about that. So they're at the Mint. They determined that only one person could have done something like this, could have framed her for this, and that is
Montague Kane.
Because Montague already knows how these tricks work. Therefore, he could use that information to his advantage. And they go to find Montague Kane. They go to his home, which for a guy who hates magicians, sure does have a home full of, magician, pieces of memorabilia and all kinds of. It's essentially like, David Copperfield, who I know you love, has essentially a museum of old memorabilia and stage props and real stuff. He's got some of Houdini's original pieces and things like this guy has it all.
Sounds kind of like Bruce Wayne in the 1989 film.
Maybe a little bit. But so this guy has it all here in his house, and they go to find him. And when they go through, they come across a chair. They're in front of a fireplace, and he speaks to them.
It would seem I have guests.
Turns out this whole thing is a trap. Oh my God, we should have seen that coming. It's all a trap. The floor opens up, they fall down, and they are in a room where the two walls have spikes on them. They're going to close in.
Such an elaborate trap.
It's a way elaborate trap. I mean, I can't even imagine how all the permits for this got through Gotham so that all this stuff could be built into this guy's house.
Well, the one thing I don't know as much about magicians as you do, but the one thing I know about good magicians is that they, as much as their craft, as much as their illusions are about danger and threat and risk, they would never put themselves or other people in actual danger, right? So this is actually something I remember from Penn and Teller discussing magic on a show or on a live performance, and so when I think about this guy who has these, he knows all the tricks to magic, and yet he has all these actual dangerous, tools and ways in which to harm people. So he's almost like the antithesis of magicians.
Yeah, and I like that you brought that up because, Penn Jillette has this thing that he will often tell people that, look, no matter what you see on our stage, we are never actually in jeopardy. If we were actually doing something that was a stunt and something that could kill us, it would make us irresponsible people.
And they don't think that's...
So even their bullet catch is not,
right.
They want you to know that you won't figure this out, but you should not try this because we know there's a trick to it.
Right.
And if you try to pass yourself off as someone who is doing this thing with actual harm, it just makes you an awful human being.
Right. And I don't think that they think that's magic.
Yeah.
I don't think putting oneself in harm's way or putting audience members in harm's way is magic.
Correct.
So, So this guy, he's bad, right?
He is an awful human being. And Batman, of course, gets out of the room with the collapsing walls that are filled with spikes, and finds out that Montague has actually escaped.
While you briefly savor your fleeting triumph, I am winging toward more comfortable surroundings.
Batman finds this photo of an old seaplane and realizes that that's where Kane has gone. So they go after him onto the seaplane. They jump on, and now the episode sort of feels like a lot of the other episodes. Up in the air, it's Batman, it's Zatanna on board this plane fighting thugs. Now this becomes interesting, Drea, and I'll be curious to see how you get Batman out of this. Batman fights two thugs. The two of them end up going over the side of one of the wings, and they plummet. Now, one would expect suddenly the bat grappling hook to come around them or something, save them. It doesn't. They fall through the clouds, and then they hit water. You're guessing that Batman knew that they were over water. But B, that was awfully high. I can't imagine that they hit that water and survived.
Similarly, in a scene right before that, Batman and Zatanna were actually chained up, locked up together, and they were thrown over, off this plane. And, of course, they managed to hang on to some kind of net that was inside the plane.
Net, yeah.
And what's interesting is that Batman manages to whip that chain that was around him and attack Monty, who then falls down off the plane onto the net. And in here, I'm expecting Batman to whip that chain around so that Monty can grab it, so he can save him. But he doesn't. He just flings the chain. Batman just flings the chain away as if to say, like, well, good luck with that.
And it's a cargo net that is already ripping. It's already, like, like Montague is in danger here.
Yes. The only person Batman is going to swing that chain around to save is the Joker. These other fools are completely dispensable. They're whatever happens to them happens to them. I don't think Batman believes that he's responsible for their deaths or injuries. I think that he sees them as thugs that are in the way, and he's defending himself. A lot of this for both Zatanna and Batman, they are defending themselves. They're punching back. There's a point where Zatanna is being held by Monty, and she takes her heel and crushes his foot with it. I think that most of this type of fighting is defensive, and of course there are times when the enemies are going to be falling out of the plane and Batman does not save them. I think that we're expected to believe that when they hit the water, they're going to survive.
Drea, I just had an epiphany, actually, while you were saying that, about the fact that Batman would only whip that chain around for the Joker. And I can't believe I didn't say this a moment ago when we were talking about him, but it took until now with you saying that. Do you think that Batman is so enamored by the Joker at this point because 12 years ago, young Zatanna, he picked a card that was the Joker, and she was like, intensity, emotion, two of hearts.
And he just held on to that card.
Do you think he's like, oh my God, this is my destiny. Zatanna did this trick, and she thought it was a badly done trick, but I think now he's like, oh my God, this was foretold.
Instead, I don't know. I like the idea that somehow before the Joker was the Joker, he knew that event had happened, and he decided to assume that particular persona, because he's like, oh, that card was pulled. Right. That's what I'm going to. That's my mission.
Right. Yeah.
But of course, we don't know because there's a big gap in those 10 years.
That's true.
So let's talk about what happened when Batman and Zatanna were chained up together. There's an important moment there.
There's a very important moment. I'm glad you brought that up. Batman, when he knew young Zatanna, he called her Zana.
You're the only one who ever calls me Zana. I really hate it.
And in order to escape from these chains that they're both chained together, he ends up saying,
Trust me, Zana.
Zana?
She takes the lockpicks out of the glove, and the two of them escape that way. So Batman has just said, I trust you if you trust me.
Yeah.
And he has revealed his identity, sort of.
As John Smith.
Now, you can't tell me that she doesn't know that the billionaire Bruce Wayne looks a whole lot like the John Smith she used to know, if he is a jet-setting billionaire playboy. But yeah, he has just revealed his identity to her.
I think he needed to. I think he knew that in order for her to get the keys, she had to essentially hold his hand. And I think that's kind of part of this moment, that he needed her to literally get close to him. And in order for her to feel comfortable doing that and trusting him, and you've got the villains surrounding them. So he couldn't have just said, hey, I've got the key. Mm-hmm. Here's where you find it. So the moment
I got the key right here. Here's where you find it.
So the moment's actually really great. I think it's really well written and special.
But it's not unique. It's not unique.
Oh no.
We just saw this exact same thing happen.
You're right.
Essentially with Talia.
Yes, you're right.
They're both in a room. They're both trapped. Now, she has taken it upon herself to remove the cowl. So it's not something he chose to do, but he does have a tendency to reveal, or at least have his identity revealed to young, beautiful women who, share special talents and gifts.
And in that exact episode, her senses are compromised, and he also tells her to trust him because he has this particular ability to get out of that whatever room they were trapped in.
And I'm pretty sure she also picks locks
I think
to
they
get
hold
them
hands.
out of the to get them, so yeah.
He's got a thing.
Yeah.
He has like a move that he uses.
Yeah, it's the anti-damsel move. We're gonna do this together. You trust me, I'll trust you. By the way, I'm Bruce Wayne.
You know what? It would work on me.
So let's not gloss over this. Bruce has a thing. Let's talk about it, Doc.
He has a thing, but so I guess I have to understand what your question is. Is your question, is he manipulating these women? No, I don't think so.
No, I think he has a compulsion to tell beautiful women who he is if given the opportunity to be tied up to them.
I think that this evidence actually is disproving some of your theories about Batman's personality, in that he actually understands the way that human behavior works, and he understands how connections and trust work, that in order for them to get out of trouble, they need to work together. And he knows that in order for them to work together, a level of trust, a level of dependency needs to be created, and he knows that that there's this closeness he has to build with these people. Now, in these cases, they are young women, but you've often said that he lacks an ability to have empathy for others, that he's
Yes, you are right. But I don't think these women apply because, as you've pointed out, Bruce attaches himself to women who are unattainable. And she is going to fall into that category. She is another one of those women who share a certain set of skills and abilities, very much like Selena, very much like Talia. Zatanna is another one of those women that Bruce can't have, but he then feels like he can attach himself to them.
So you're saying this is there's a safety net here. He knows that this isn't going to work, that she's going to be leaving, or that that relationship is dead before it started. So he's going to put himself out there and take risks. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, I think that fits into your previous assessment that he finds and is attracted to women he can't have, and therefore it makes everything easy and safe and all of that. I'm not saying that he doesn't necessarily recognize the emotions in other people. I don't think he necessarily always understands them, because as we, if we want to talk about earlier on in this episode, I think she has a crush on him. I don't think it's a romantic thing between the two of them. I don't think they've spent a summer, romancing one another. I think she has a crush, and that's why she's devastated to find out that he's leaving. And I think that, I don't think that he necessarily, he's going to plug away at his mission and he's going to leave. I'm leaving tomorrow. And I'll tell Zana, later on or whatever. But I don't know. I don't see this being a positive relationship any more than either of the other two.
On that note, I do agree. I think that he's much more able to connect in this way and to get close in this way, knowing that there's no future for them, because he has another commitment, if you will. But I think that what I was getting to before is that often you've criticized him for being a little bit too out there in terms of potentially being antisocial and in terms of potentially being prone to prefer violence and being against humanity than being compassionate and being for humanity. And I think in these cases, he's understanding these relationships, he's understanding these friendships, and he wants to save them and he wants them to live. And I think that this is proof for that.
Right.
So,
Does it weird you out that he only makes connections with people that are other superheroes / supervillains? Like Bruce doesn't have any regular connections.
He has Commissioner Gordon.
He's got Alfred, but Gordon is a hero. So you've got Gordon, you've got Alfred, you've got Robin, you've got now Zatanna and Talia and Selena. And then he doesn't really have any like relationships. I mean, Leslie.
What, with like normies?
Yeah. I mean, you got Leslie, but Leslie knows. Like, Leslie's in on it. I think this episode is all about how Batman is just revealing himself as a guy he's got a thing. Anyway, something else that I really liked about this episode is the way that it ends. Batman doesn't take Montague down. Zatanna does.
Don't you know? A magician never does the same trick twice.
Punches him, and then Montague is then captured by the police, and we see them, and they have a really nice moment, Batman and Zatanna, as she is saying,
So, you never wrote.
I meant to, really.
One of the things that she says in this last interaction with him is interesting to me because she says,
And for what it's worth, Dad would have been proud of you tonight.
You too.
I almost see Zatanna as very much like the sensei, as a surrogate father for Bruce. Do you think that Bruce is constantly going for that, I'm going to make not only Thomas proud of me, but also anyone who's ever raised me proud of me?
Absolutely. And I think if you look back to what he decided to do, he decided to spend an intensive 3 months with this older, accomplished, talented man. And he wanted to learn everything that he knew. And so that too, reaching out to somebody and sort of asking for that, parental relationship and to be able to fulfill whatever, at the time, obviously only Bruce knew what he was doing, but he wanted to fulfill this dream that he had, this goal that he had. And so, yeah, I think that's very clear that he sought out Zatanna for that relationship, and that he probably saw him as a father figure, and that the loss of Zatanna is certainly not as deep as the loss of his own father, but he would have liked the idea that had he been alive, he would have been proud.
Yeah. She does the exact same thing to him that he did to her and has done to hundreds of people since then. He turns around and she's gone. But what is there?
A flyer for her next show.
It's not a flyer for her next show. It is a full body, like, promotional image that says Zatanna, Mistress of Magic, and she assigned it to John Smith.
John, I hate goodbyes too. Love, Zana. P.S. Don't forget to write.
By the way, I should point out that the villain of this episode, Montague, is played by Michael York, who also played Vertigo in the episode Off Balance with Talia al Ghul.
Wow.
So there's another correlation there. Well, Drea, it's been a great episode. It's just a shame that there's, just no psychological studies on things like magic.
What?
Wait, what?
Well, I mentioned before that there is a subfield of psychology about the psychology of magic.
Yes, the thing you didn't go into. Yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, there are a lot of behavioral, cognitive practical studies that look at the impact of magic, that look at the techniques of magic. And if you think about what magic is essentially about deception.
Right.
It's about perception. It's about bending the rules of reality, right? That we live in a world where we have developed a cognitive, an emotional, spatial understanding of what the world is.
Right.
We have certain expectations. And then you have these magicians who, of course, are forms of entertainment, but you have these illusions and tricks that tell our brain that something is happening when in fact that thing is not happening. Right.
Okay.
So there's some studies that look into the different types of deceptions, the different types of distractions and things like that. One study that caught my eye that I wanted to share with you is a neuroimaging study. So a study that looked at brain function and brain processes in relation to tricks and in relation to magic tricks.
Okay.
And part of the reasoning for wanting to study the brain was because there's this kind of impact of surprise that we have. So I know this probably doesn't often happen to you because you know magic pretty well. But, when I see a card trick, for instance, and I thought I put my card somewhere and then it appears at the top of the deck, there's an experience there. It's an experience of like surprise and a little bit of confusion and you're taken aback.
And instantly you want to burn that person at the stake for sorcery.
Well, usually for most of us, that experience is, I know where my card initially was. Mm-hmm. So now my brain is trying to fill that gap. It's a discrepancy, right? I think few of us are actually like, oh, that's it's an unexplained event. That's a wonderful, mm-hmm. Most of us will react with pretty analytical thoughts about when did that happen? How did that happen? When was I distracted? What other factors are taking place?
Well, even just the question that every magician is going to be asked, how did you do that? It's an instant notification that I don't think that was real magic.
Yeah.
I think you did something and I want to know what you did and how you did it. Yeah.
Exactly. And so these researchers wanted to study the neural basis of that experience. And so what they did was they understood that there are, again, in our perception of the world, there are what we call causal relationships. So for instance, if I had an egg in my hand and I dropped the egg on the cement, what should happen?
It should break.
It should break and yolk should come out and I should get pretty upset, right? Mm-hmm. So that's an example, a simple example of a causal relationship. This is what I've learned. This is the reality. So causal relationships form our belief systems about what's possible. So when a magician, for instance, takes an egg and shows it to us and makes it clear that that's an egg and then drops it on the ground and it's suddenly a ping pong ball.
Right.
Our causal relationships have been violated. There's a disruption there. So these researchers in Germany actually decided to show people clips of magic tricks and clips of what we in science call like control clips while they're in an fMRI machine. So the clips are 20, 30 seconds long. The tricks are pretty standard. Actually, the one that I looked at, it had a guy have a glass of water on a table, and he poured that glass of water into a mug, and the mug was like a black mug. And you watch the water go into the mug, and then he takes the black mug and turns it over, and a piece of ice comes out.
Okay.
So the magic trick there, of course, is turning water into ice.
Mm-hmm.
The control clip of that particular, scenario was the man pouring water from a glass into a mug and then pouring that mug out, and it's still water. So in that case, the reason it's a control clip is that there's no violation in causal relationships.
Right.
That's what we expected to see. So what's interesting is that the researchers, knowing that magicians would know the difference, would know how tricks work, and wouldn't feel that sense of surprise and confusion, they also stuck them in MRI machines because they wanted to see how their brains lit up watching these scenarios. So, what do you think they found? What they found was that when folks were watching, when non-magicians were watching those magic tricks, certain parts of the brain were highly active, more active than when they were watching those regular control clips. The parts of the brain included the head of the caudate nucleus, the left inferior frontal gyrus, and the left anterior insula. That all makes sense to you, right?
Oh, yeah, perfectly. I'm right on top of it. I know exactly every word that you said and what they mean.
Okay, so what does all that
But
mean?
for those people who don't know, why don't you just go ahead and explain it?
So those are actually parts of the brain that they're pretty complex, but they're parts of the brain that are responsible for certain integration of information. So for instance, the anterior insula is responsible for a lot of what we call abilities in human awareness. So that includes emotion, empathy, memory. So there's lots of stuff happening in that particular part of the brain.
Okay.
Interestingly, for magicians who watched the clips, those parts of the brains were not more active. It was if they were just watching clips of whatever. Mm-hmm. So that basically confirmed the researchers' hypothesis that because magicians did not have that violation in causal relationships, they knew how tricks worked. So they didn't have that lapse in cognitive understanding of the scenario, that their brains were working very differently. So how is this helpful?
Is it that they're working differently, or is it that they're working the exact same, but there is no difference between the two clips for them? So for them, because they know it's a magic trick, it's just as expected as to watch water come out of the mug.
Sure.
Therefore, it's not that their brain is working differently, it's that it's working the exact same for both clips.
Yes, you're right. So to clarify, they're working differently than the non-magicians when they're looking at those clips.
Gotcha.
So, and I think, to clarify, the reason they're quote unquote working differently is that they're not having that moment of surprise or confusion.
Right.
So the reason we have this field of psychology of magic is to really discover and uncover some of these really interesting things about the way the brain works. And magicians essentially provide us with all these wonderful scenarios, these wonderful problems that we can include in research studies and find out how the brain is processing these different things.
That's really interesting. Now,
It's very cool.
Now I'm going to have to go and start looking at lots of videos and studies about the psychology of magic.
Yeah. So why don't I'll send you the clip. We can post the clip of an example of one of these magic tricks that were shown in the MRI. And, it just speaks to the idea that there is a psychology of magic, but there's also a magic of psychology.
Oh, I see what you did there. Look at that. That's awesome. So, Drea, ultimately, what'd you think of this episode?
I loved it.
I did too. It's a very good episode. I love Zatanna. Any opportunity we get to pal around with her is going to be a fantastic one. So, Drea, where can folks find you online?
On Twitter, I'm at Arkham Asylum Doc, and my website is underthemaskonline.com.
And you can find me. I am at bward028. You can also talk to both of us. We are at Arkham Sessions on Twitter. You can also email us if you have any questions. We are arkhamsessions@gmail.com. So join us next week for the episode The Mechanic. Until then, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Andrea Letamendi.
And we are
The Arkham Sessions.